deaths occurred because of that. We're trying to confirm that, but is there a feeling that the protest is getting closer to Gaddafi's stronghold in Tripoli?
There is that feeling, certainly, that he's becoming more and more isolated, and actually his areas of control now are maybe limited to the south and around Sabha, in Tripoli, and in his hometown of Sirte. But there's also a feeling that he's not a man who's going to give up so easily. He's not a man who's going to give up without a fight, and certainly all the rhetoric coming out from either him or his son indicate that, and people do take that quite seriously. Certainly here in Benghazi, they call it a liberated city. There is not much violence going on. Here and there you hear some sporadic gunfire, but by and large it is under control. But people are on edge. People suspect other people. They always keep trying to figure out whether a person is actually on Gaddafi's side or on the opposition side. They are worried about a counter-offensive. They are organizing themselves in case there is a counter-offensive.
Hoda, thanks very much indeed for that. Hoda Abdul Hamid in Benghazi there. Just a couple of lines coming out of the US. Apparently, the Libyan ambassador to Washington, D.C. has been withdrawn and no longer represents Libya's affairs. And we're also hearing that the US Treasury says $30 billion worth in Libyan assets have been blocked by the United States. So things obviously moving against the regime there. Abdel Fattah Yunus is the former head of the Libyan Special Forces. He renounced his post last week. Our correspondent Jackie Rowland managed to speak with him. He told her he wouldn't rule out asking for international help.
It is out of question. We will never receive any foreign troops or accept any foreign military base to be set up on the Libyan soil. However, when push comes to shove, as I was asked, will you be in need of an airstrike? I replied, it will be an alternative solution. If we found no solution is reached from Colonel Gaddafi's side or his aides to put an end to these massacres, all are firm and adamant that airstrikes must be launched, provided no jet fighters will land on Libyan territories. They must land in the Italian Androsa base or the aircraft carrier.
Let's move on to some other news now. Egypt's former President Hosni Mubarak has not been heard from since he stepped down last month, but now the spotlight is back on the former leader. Egypt's public prosecutor has issued a travel ban on him and his family and put a freeze on their financial assets. Ayman Mohideen has more.
Forced out of office and now in the crosshairs of Egypt's prosecutor general. On Monday, former President Hosni Mubarak and his family were banned from traveling abroad and all of their financial assets and property in Egypt frozen pending further investigation. Mubarak and his family had reportedly accumulated billions of dollars in wealth during their 30 years in power in both domestic and foreign assets. The president's two sons, Ala and Gamal, were widely believed to have exploited their family ties for personal financial gains. Holding Mubarak and his former regime accountable is important if Egypt is to make a break from its past.
I think it's a very positive decision, one of the demands of the revolution, which pushes it forward and reassures the people to a great extent, especially these investigations in corruption.
Shortly after Mubarak left office, Egypt's foreign ministry requested foreign governments and financial institutions to freeze all foreign assets belonging to Mubarak's family. The travel ban and freeze is being imposed nearly 3 weeks after Mubarak stepped down, leaving some to question the prosecutor's intentions.
This is a positive step, but very late. It should have been taken when the prosecutor issued his decision to freeze Mubarak's assets abroad, and even before then, because it has given Mubarak time to smuggle his assets out of the country.
Mubarak is the most senior official of the previous regime, who is now under investigation for illegal activity. Similar travel bans and investigations have been launched into several top officials that served under Mubarak. And on Monday, indictments were filed against former ministers who are now set to go on trial in early March. Holding former regime officials accountable was one of the main demands of Egypt's revolutionary movement, saying the current leadership of the country must cut all ties with the past by sending a strong signal it will prosecute Mubarak's alleged wrongdoings. While many will see this as a positive step in the right direction, Others will say it's too little too late, and that the delay in issuing such a freeze will merely have allowed the Mubarak family even more opportunity to hide any ill-gotten gains. Ayman Muhyiddin, AlJazeera, Cairo.
Over in Jordan, opposition leaders are demanding a greater pace of reform, that despite a promise from the Prime Minister of new laws this year. Meanwhile, at least 5,000 supporters of King Abdullah gathered in Amman to show their allegiance to the royal family. It's in response to opposition rallies which have been held on 8 consecutive Fridays. In Amman, in the city of Sohar, a supermarket has been set on fire in the 3rd day of unrest. Anti-government protesters blocked roads to 2 of the country's main export ports on Monday. A doctor said 6 people had died in Sohar a day earlier during clashes with police, but the health minister says 1 person had been killed. In Bahrain, the main opposition bloc has officially agreed to join talks with the government without any preconditions. It comes as pro-reform rallies were staged in key Manama locations to maintain pressure on the monarchy to bring change. King Hamad bin Isa Al Khalifa has reshuffled his cabinet and appealed for talks with the opposition. In Tunisia, 2 ministers have resigned from the caretaker government. It comes just a day after the Prime Minister bowed out following a wave of deadly protests. Nazim Mashiri has this report from Tunis.
There is a heavy security presence in the capital. For the first time, alongside the police and army, the National Guard. Working together, they say, to maintain order. In the past few days, several people have been killed in clashes here. The escalation of violence, something not seen since Ben Ali fled. The interim Prime Minister Mohamed Ghannouchi has gone, but the protesters remain outside his old office. They say their demonstrations are peaceful, all the trouble caused by armed militia who infiltrated their ranks. Their demands, the resignation of the entire government. How long do you intend to stay here?
For all my life, to save the future of my children and the children of mine. I will stay all my life.
This is the man who wants to bring calm. Badji Kaid Zebsi, an 84-year-old politician. He served under Tunisia's post-independence leader Habib Bourguiba. Mohamed Abu is a lawyer imprisoned during Ben Ali's reign. He says the current administration is facing an impossible task.
It seems people want to accept harsh solutions. The people got rid of the Ben Ali regime in this revolution, and they don't want to go back to the past. The problem is that people are not used to political matters, which requires compromise.
Tunisia is still a country in turmoil, unable to move on from its past. There's no mood of reconciliation here. It seems the revolution that toppled Ben Ali many weeks ago still isn't over. Nazim Mashiri, AlJazeera, Tunis.
Still to come on the programme, the state of press freedom in Malaysia, how new media regulations are sparking an angry backlash. And from Iraq, a former British security officer is given a life sentence for murder.
Hello again. It's still very cold for many of us in the northern parts of Asia. The winds are still coming down from the north, dragging in that fresher air. We've got a lot of cloud, a few outbreaks of snow, but it's mostly just going to be the temperature you'll really notice as we head through Wednesday. A top temperature in Tokyo this time just of 8 degrees. Now, if we see any wintry weather, that's likely to be along the western coast of Japan here further east. There's a better chance of a dry day and maybe a little bit of sunshine coming through as well. Now, some of that cold weather is filtering further south as well. So Shanghai will have a fresher day, no higher than 8 degrees here. For Hong Kong, for the time being, it's actually quite warm. We'll get to around 25 degrees, that's 77 in Fahrenheit. But I think for Wednesday, we won't get above 19. A bit further south, and we've seen torrential downpours in the southern parts of the Philippines. That area of wet weather is now pushing a little bit further northwards. So the southeast, where we saw the worst of the rains, it will be a lot drier here for Tuesday, just more isolated showers to deal with here. Java, though, that's still going to be very wet, even Jakarta. For Australia, the wettest weather here is still in the far north. We've got one area of low pressure there across the Northern Territory and another one over Western Australia. Lots of rain pushing its way further southwards as we head through Wednesday. Heavy downpours here.
On the next Riz Khan show, as social revolution sweeps through the Middle East, how marginalized has the US become and how will this affect its future role in the region? Riz Khan at this time on Al Jazeera.
As protests, violence, and the call for political reform spreads across the Arab world, Al Jazeera's in-depth coverage of events on the ground brings you the news as it breaks. Ongoing coverage of the Libya uprising on Al Jazeera.
Hello there, welcome back. Let's remind you of the top stories here on Al Jazeera. Reports are coming in that the Libyan Air Force has bombed an ammunition depot held by opposition forces in the city of AlJazeera. And the online edition of Kurna newspaper is reporting several dead after forces loyal to Libyan leader Muammar Gaddafi opened fire to disperse a protest in the capital. That comes as the international community meets in Geneva to discuss the ongoing crisis in Libya. Egypt's top prosecutor slapped a travel ban on former President Hosni Mubarak and his family, pending further investigations. He's also ordered a freeze on their financial assets inside the country. And a heavy military presence is back on the streets of the Tunisian capital a day after the Prime Minister bowed out following a wave of protests. 2 ministers have resigned from the caretaker government. Now, Al Jazeera has spoken to the Italian Foreign Minister, Franco Frattini, who's attending the Human Rights Council meeting in Geneva. He says Italy is ready to send a humanitarian mission to Libya.
Italy decided to suspend unilaterally gas and oil supply a week ago. We did so unilaterally while other foreign companies have not yet decided to do the same. In addition, of course, we have been helping many foreigners to evacuate and to leave the country and to save them and to rescue them from the violence of the Libyan regime. And we are ready also to send, as soon as possible, as soon as the security conditions will allow, a humanitarian mission or humanitarian flights to respond to the request we have got from people that are in Benghazi and that we've already contacted. We are in touch with people that are fighting for liberties in the province of Cyrenaica. We are the only one country that are doing so.
And you can see that interview in full with the Italian Foreign Minister Franco Frattini by watching Talk to Al Jazeera. That's at 20:30 GMT on Monday. Now, a British former security contractor has been sentenced to life imprisonment after admitting to shooting dead 2 men in Iraq. He's the first Westerner to be convicted in an Iraqi court since the 2003 US invasion of the country. Jane Arif has this report.
For Danny Fitzsimons, it could have been so much worse. Hours after he arrived in the country 2 years ago, in a drunken rage, he shot and killed an Australian and British co-worker and wounded an Iraqi guard. That's not in dispute. The question was his state of mind when he did it. The verdict, not death by hanging, but life in prison. In Iraq, though, that means just 15 years, a far shorter sentence than he likely would have received in the West.
We respect the independence of the Iraqi judicial system and note the court's verdict and the sentence. We will continue to offer consular assistance to Mr. Fitzsimons. At this time, we should also remember the families of those who died in the tragic incident Mr. Fitzsimons was on trial for.
His lawyer here says it wouldn't have gone nearly so well if the trial hadn't dragged on for a year. A year ago, the legacy of the U.S. security firm Blackwater shooting dead 14 civilians in a Baghdad square was still very much alive. It led Iraq to ban the company and put strict controls